Well, hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar from Coleman Insights. I'm Jay Naklis, an associate consultant here, and this is our Contemporary Music Super Study 3 Deep Dive webinar. We've been releasing findings over the last month. Can't believe this is our third Contemporary Music Super Study already. If you'd like to follow along on Twitter, we'll be tweeting some highlights, and you can use the hashtag CMSS3 on Twitter. And we will have a Q&A at the end of this webinar, so make sure you don't go anywhere. We'll give you some details here in a moment about how you can ask your questions as you go along and think about them, and then we'll have that at the end of the session today. To get us started, let me introduce to you the president of Coleman Insights. Here is Warren Kurtzman.
Thanks, Jay, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. As Jay mentioned, I'm Warren Kurtzman of Coleman Insights, and in a few moments, I will be joined on the presentation by my colleagues, Boyne and Sam Milkman. We are here today to share with you the major findings of Contemporary Music Super Study 3, which, as the name implies, is the follow-up to the now annual studies we first presented in 2019 and 2020. If you attended our initial presentation of these results at last month's All Access Audio Summit, you will see all of the same findings, but we will go deeper on some of our findings in today's deep dive webinar. Once we complete our prepared remarks in about 30 to 35 minutes, John, Sam, and I will be available for a 15-minute Q&A session. At any time during today's webinar, you can enter your questions in the GoToWebinar software. That's the panel on the side of your screen, and we will try to answer as many of your questions as possible at the end of the session. What you're about to see is the result of a massive music test conducted on the same online platform we use for delivering Fact360 strategic music tests to our radio station clients. By massive, I mean that we surveyed 1,000 respondents between the ages of 12 and 54 across the United States and Canada. We employed quotas covering age, gender, ethnicity, and geography to ensure that our sample appropriately represents the population. To build the list of titles to be tested, we once again worked with our friends at MRC Data. Using their data, we compiled the list of 2000's most consumed songs based on streaming, radio airplay, and sales. The list revealed interesting nuggets, including that Roddy Ricch's The Box was the #1 song last year in terms of streaming, The Weeknd's Blinding Lights got the most radio airplay, and Dynamite by BTS was 2020's leader in terms of sales. We then supplemented that list by adding the most consumed songs across 6 genres: pop, country, alternative rock, hip hop and R&B, electronic and dance, and Latin, to make sure that we had an appropriate representation of each in our study. Finally, we removed songs that were more than 5 years old. For example, among 2020's most consumed songs that fit that description were Journey's Don't Stop Believing and Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas, 2 songs with amazing staying power that we had to exclude from last year's study as well. Another example of an older song we had to exclude this year was Dreams by Fleetwood Mac. It made the list after blowing up because of its use in a widely seen TikTok video. Since this is the Contemporary Music Super Study, we did not include these titles in our test list. I also want to stress that we did not name this study the New Music Super Study. It's called the Contemporary Music Super Study, and that distinction is important. This is not a study of brand new music, but is instead a broader study of recent contemporary music. We also want to acknowledge Michael Pelea and his team at Hooks Unlimited, who provided the hooks we tested with our respondents. Most of our clients at Coleman Insights use the services of Hooks Unlimited, and no matter who you do your music research with, we strongly recommend utilizing them. When respondents in our study were played the hook from each title, they were asked to rate it on a scale ranging from like a lot to dislike a lot, or to tell us if they were unfamiliar with it. Using this approach, we calculated evaluation average scores that are based on the full range of responses to each song. These scores provide insights into how mass appeal a title or genre is, because it considers not only those respondents who are passionate supporters, but also those who react negatively or are unfamiliar with the song. So now that you know a little bit more about how we conducted the study, I will turn things over to John, who will share with you the first of our key findings.
So let's jump right into it. What does Contemporary Music SuperStudy 3 tell us about the state of contemporary music? And among this big, broad group of people, which is the most popular contemporary song? Well, it's an interesting story this year. So let's take a brief detour. You may be familiar with the movie Groundhog Day, in which Bill Murray plays a cynical weatherman who is stuck in a seemingly endless time loop. Every day he wakes up and it's Groundhog Day in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. For him, it's the same day, over and over and over and over. For many of us, over the past year, there were plenty of Groundhog Day feelings. Stuck at home, not going to work, not going to school, not going to restaurants, not going to movies, not going to concerts, day after day after day. Well, it turns out that there is also a decidedly Groundhog Day-like feeling to the results of Contemporary Music SuperStudy 3. It all looks very familiar. So let's go back to last year's Contemporary Music SuperStudy 2. What was the #1 most popular song back then? You may recall that it was Ed Sheeran's Shape of You. And how about now? What is the #1 most popular song of Contemporary Music SuperStudy 3? Ed Sheeran's Shape of You. That's right. A year later, 1,000 interviews later, the exact same song rises to the top. Feels like Groundhog Day, right? Now, you might be thinking, hey, that's not a new song. But remember, this is a study of contemporary music, not new music. It's a study of the most consumed songs of last year, and those songs could be up to 5 years old. So Shape of You qualified for last year's study as well as this year's study. And brace yourself, it could qualify next year as well. All right, well, that's one song. Let's take a broader look at things. What was the top 10 a year ago in Contemporary Music SuperStudy 2? And now let's unveil the top 10 of Contemporary Music SuperStudy 3. #1, as we've already told you, is Ed Sheeran's Shape of You. #2 is Believer by Imagine Dragons, which you can see was #3 in last year's study. #3 this year is Blinding Lights by The Weeknd. That's a new addition. #4, There's Nothing Holding Me Back by Shawn Mendes. That was #2 a year ago. #5 is Someone You Loved, just like it was in last year's study. #6 is Rockstar by Post Malone, which was not in the top 10 of last year's study. #7 is Girls Like You by Maroon 5 and Cardi B. That was #10 last year. #8, another Post Malone song, Better Now. #9, Dancing with a Stranger. And #10, Ed Sheeran's Perfect, which was #9 last time. So in total, 6 of the top 10 in this year's study were also in the top 10 of last year's study. Moreover, I can tell you that several of the new additions to this year's top 10 were only just outside of the top 10 last year. Things don't feel all that different, do they? Feels kind of like Groundhog Day. How about the most prolific artist? Who had the most songs in the top 100 in last year's Contemporary Music SuperStudy 2? That would be Post Malone, who had 8 of the 100 most popular songs. And this year, you guessed it, Post Malone, this time with 6 of the 100 most popular songs. Sure feels like Groundhog Day. All right, let's mix it up. Instead of looking at the top of the list, let's go all the way to the bottom. What was the least popular song in last year's SuperStudy 2? Surely it won't be the exact same this time around in SuperStudy 3. Think again. Last year's bottom song was Baby Shark, and this year's bottom song is Baby Shark. Crazy, right? A year later, 1,000 interviews later, and it almost feels like nothing has changed. It feels like Groundhog Day. Now, while things did change in some ways, and there are loads of interesting findings we'll show you later when we dig further into the data, For sure, there's an element of consistency to music tastes coming out of our pandemic year. Nobody went to concerts, many new releases were held back, and we retreated to comfort food. I guess these results are telling us that Ed Sheeran's Shape of You is our musical comfort food. Well, let's dig more deeply into the results of Contemporary Music SuperStudy 3. You'll see more findings related to that Groundhog Day theme, but you'll also see other interesting findings about the lay of the land of contemporary music tastes. Although this is a test of the most consumed songs of 2020, as you have already seen, they're not all actually from 2020. In this era distribution chart of all songs that we've tested, you can see that 46% are from 2020, 42% are from 2019, 8% are from 2018, 4% are from 2017, and 1% is from 2016. Now let's layer in the era distribution of the 100 most popular songs. Note that the top 100 songs in tan lean older than the test list in blue. On the left, note that 46% of all songs tested are from 2020, but just 26% of the top 100 songs are from 2020. Taking a step to the right, we see that 42% of all songs tested are from 2019, while 46% of the top 100 titles come from 2019. Then we see that songs from 2018 and 2017 really overperform. In combination, songs from 2018 and 2017 account for 12% of all songs that we've tested, but 27% of the top 100. Ed Sheeran's Shape of You and Imagine Dragons' Believer come from these years. The fact that the most popular songs lean older is not completely surprising to us. The older songs that are still being consumed highly enough to qualify for this study have inherently exhibited staying power. Whereas some newer songs may still be developing in familiarity and finding their fan base, these older songs have largely weathered the storm and they benefit from having above average familiarity with consumers. That said, this older lean to music taste is more pronounced than it was in earlier super studies. Let's look at a trend. Since these studies are done on a yearly basis, we've aligned them based on their relative era so that we can more easily make comparisons. So the most recent year for SuperStudy 1 was 2018, the most recent year for SuperStudy 2 was 2019, and the most recent year for SuperStudy 3 is 2020. In SuperStudy 1, the most recent year of music accounted for 40% of the top 100 most popular songs. In SuperStudy 2, taste shifted a little older, relatively speaking, and the most recent year of music accounted for 36% of the top 100 songs. Now, in SuperStudy 3, we see that tastes have shifted substantially older, and the most recent year of music accounts for just 26% of the top 100 songs. Thus, in these pandemic times, we have the Groundhog Day effect, where a higher than normal proportion of the most popular songs are older hits. Now, you may be wondering if this older shift in taste is isolated to any one particular segment of the population. It's really not. Instead, it's rather widespread. Let me show you some numbers. On the next couple of charts, we're going to focus on this set of data, the percentage of top 100 songs in each study that come from the most recent year, and see how it looks among different segments of the population. First, we'll look at these numbers among 12 to 34-year-olds. In the first super study, 40% of the 100 most popular songs with 12 to 34-year-olds came from the most recent year. In the second super study, that dropped to 32%. And in the third study, it has fallen to 26%. Thus, their favorite contemporary songs have gotten older. Among 35 to 54-year-olds, we see a similar pattern. The percentage of their top 100 songs that come from the most recent year has gone from 37% to 34% to 25%. Now, in addition to finding that the contemporary music tastes of both 12 to 34-year-olds and 35 to 54-year-olds have gotten older, note that the numbers are similar. In both the younger and older halves of the sample, roughly a quarter of the most popular songs come from the most recent year. So when it comes to contemporary music, it's not like 12 to 34-year-olds have far newer tastes than 35 to 54-year-olds. A similar pattern is evident among women as well as among men. Among both groups, the most popular contemporary songs have gotten older. How about among fans of different genres of music? Well, the degrees vary, but among all 6 of these groups, the 100 most popular contemporary songs have indeed gotten older. Whether we're talking about Latin music fans, hip hop and R&B fans, dance and electronic music fans, alternative rock fans, pop fans, or country fans. Now, are there differences? Sure. On the left, note that a relatively high 38% of the top 100 with Latin music fans come from the most recent year, whereas on the right, a relatively low 27% of the top 100 with country music fans come from the most recent year. In fact, in all 3 super studies, the most popular songs with country fans have included relatively fewer of the most recent year songs. That said, again, the big overarching finding here is that there has been a shift older in contemporary music taste, and that shift is widely evident among different segments of the population: younger, older, male, female, and among different genre fan bases. Now, thus far, we've been talking a lot about music eras, so now let's dig into music genres. Here is the genre distribution of all songs tested. You can see that the list primarily consists of songs from 6 genres. While classifying songs by genre can be subjective, we've tried to do so in a way that's consistent with Billboard charts and other industry standards. Remember that the test list is based on last year's most consumed songs. So the fact that hip hop and R&B accounts for 31% of all songs tested, more than any other genre, reflects the fact that hip hop and R&B is the genre with the most number of highly consumed songs last year. Next most numerous in the test list are country and pop. And finally, we have alternative rock, Latin, and dance and electronic. Although this test list was primarily built off of the top songs in streaming, sales, and airplay last year, as Warren explained earlier, we supplemented the list with top-tier songs from each genre. If we had not done so, alternative rock, Latin, and dance electronic would have had smaller shares of the test list than what you see here. Next, let's layer in the genre distribution of the 100 most popular songs. Near the center of the chart in tan, you can see that pop has the biggest share of the top 100 songs, 40%. Notice how much of an overperformance this is. Whereas pop music accounts for 20% of all songs tested, it accounts for 40% of the 100 most popular songs. As you'll learn as we work our way through this presentation, pop titles tend to be broadly appealing, with wide popularity across various segments of the audience. So even if pop isn't your favorite genre, there's a good chance that it's your second favorite. On the left in tan, you can see that hip hop and R&B titles account for 27% of the top 100 songs. Other genres have smaller shares of the top 100. Country at 13%, alternative rock at 10%, and dance electronic at 9%. Meanwhile, there are no Latin titles among the top 100. This indicates that in this mass appeal study, Spanish language music is not as broadly familiar or as broadly popular as the other genres of music measured. So how does this compare to the previous super studies? Here, we'll look at a trend. In Super Study 1, pop accounted for 42% of the top 100 songs, while hip hop and R&B accounted for 23% of the top 100 songs. In SuperStudy 2, we saw declines for pop, for hip hop and R&B, and for dance and electronic material. Meanwhile, country was up. Pop remained in the lead, but country had pulled into second place, ahead of hip hop and R&B. Now, in SuperStudy 3, pop remains in the lead. Beyond that, we see some shifts. Hip hop and R&B material is up to 27% of the top 100, which is higher than in both previous SuperStudies, while country recedes back from the high of last year's study. Next, we're going to get into some detail on each of the 6 major genres. We'll look at the tastes of fans of each genre, and we will reveal the top performing songs of each genre. We'll start with hip hop and R&B. Here in blue is the baseline genre distribution of all songs tested that I showed you earlier. Next, in tan, we'll layer in the distribution of the 100 most popular songs among fans of the hip hop and R&B genre. What do they like? Well, not surprisingly, you can see that many of the best testing songs with hip hop and R&B fans are hip hop and R&B titles, 66% to be exact. Beyond that, notice how pop accounts for 23% of the best testing titles with hip hop and R&B fans. This is a pattern we'll see play out in other genres as well. Among various fan bases, pop tends to be the next best, most compatible genre. Meanwhile, no other style breaks out of the low single digits among hip hop and R&B fans. For example, note how country music accounts for 21% of the test list, but only 3% of the top 100 with hip hop and R&B fans. That gap highlights how country is not generally compatible with hip hop and R&B. So let's look at the top scoring songs in hip hop and R&B. Again, the classification of songs can be subjective, but we've generally followed the lead of Billboard charts and other industry standards. On the left will be the 5 most popular hip hop and R&B songs in the study. Numbers 1 and 2 are Rockstar and Better Now, and both of these Post Malone songs were in the previous SuperStudies top 5 for hip hop and R&B. Then we've got Heartless, Go Crazy, and Mood. You may notice that some of these top hip hop and R&B titles could be described as somewhat poppy, and that would be an understandable observation. In many genres, the most popular titles tend to be rather accessible and broadly appealing. Almost by definition, the biggest hits are the ones whose appeal expands beyond their core lane. Later, we'll see this pattern in other genres as well. Now, does this list look different if we zero in on fans of the genre? On the right, let's take a look at the 5 most popular hip hop and R&B songs among hip hop and R&B fans. Note that Rockstar, Better Now, and Go Crazy are in both lists. And although Heartless and Mood are among the top 5 in total on the left, but not in the top 5 with genre fans on the right, I can tell you that they aren't too far outside of that top tier. In hip hop and R&B, we generally find that mass market hits of the genre tend to also be popular with core fans of the genre. That's an important takeaway and one that we will see repeated as we review upcoming genres. Sometimes we hear concerns that a song will lose its appeal with core fans when it gets too big, but such thinking isn't really supported by this research. Songs that become mass market hits oftentimes retain their popularity with core genre fans. Next, let's turn our attention to country. Here again in blue is the baseline genre distribution of all songs tested. And here in tan is the genre distribution of the 100 best testing titles among country fans. 53% of the top 100 songs with country fans are country songs. Interestingly, behind the scenes, when we dig deeper into that number, we see quite a bit of passion. As compared to the other genres, country music evokes the highest evaluation scores from its fan base. The next best genre among country fans is pop at 28% of their top 100. This again highlights the breadth of pop music's appeal. Here are the most popular country songs in this study: Meant to Be, I Hope, 10,000 Hours, The Bones, and Whiskey Glasses. Again, it's no surprise that several of these biggest hits are rather poppy. Several are ones that crossed over from country to other formats. You'll also notice that Morgan Wallen, despite some recent controversy, has a top 5 country song. And among country fans, Morgan Wallen songs occupy 2 of the top 5 spots. Next, let's look at pop music. Among pop fans, 45% of the top 100 songs are pop. Then we see some diversity of tastes, which reflects how pop's popularity is evident among a variety of other genre fan bases. In tan, you can see that 24% of the top 100 titles with pop fans are hip hop and R&B, 12% are alternative rock, 11% are dance and electronic, and 7% are country. What are the best testing pop songs in the study? This will look familiar to you. Shape of You, Blinding Lights, There's Nothing Holding Me Back, Someone You Loved, and Girls Like You. It's notable that all 5 of these top pop songs showed up in this study's overall top 10 list that I showed you earlier. How about among pop fans? Very similar. 4 of the 5 songs are the same in both lists. Alternative rock is up next. You can see that 16% of the top 100 songs with alternative rock fans are alternative rock. To be fair, as a smaller genre in the test, it's not mathematically possible for that number to be as big as the numbers we saw for some of the larger genres. But even taking that into account, 16% is still rather low. When we look at the most popular songs among alternative rock fans, there just aren't a lot of alternative rock titles near the top. Instead, we see quite a bit of pop. Among alternative rock fans, 44% of their top 100 are pop songs. And beyond that, we also see representations of hip hop, R&B, country, and dance electronic. Aside from Latin, there's a variety of genres in the top 100 of alternative rock fans. Here are the most popular alternative rock songs. This list looks very similar to what we saw a year ago. Shade's Trampoline is the only new addition. As compared to the other genres, the tip-top alternative rock titles are notably oldest. Among alternative rock fans, we see a similar list. So, as we've seen now in several genres, the biggest hits of the genre also tend to be highly popular among the core fans of the genre. Next, we'll go to Latin music. Again, as a smaller genre, there aren't enough Latin titles in the study to yield a really big percentage here. Among Latin music fans, 19% of their top 100 songs are Latin, while 41% are pop and 26% are hip hop and R&B. Here are the top Latin songs. Mamacita is number 1, and here are the top Latin songs among fans of the genre. The last genre we'll look at is dance and electronic music. This too is a smaller genre. Among dance electronic fans, 16% of their top 100 are dance electronic songs, while 44% are pop and 19% are hip hop and R&B. The Middle is the number 1 dance electronic song, just as it was in last year's study. Something Just Like This and Happier are also repeat performers in the dance electronic top 5. Among genre fans, the list is similar, with the exception of Roses coming through. Next up, Sam will show you how contemporary music tastes look among different groups of people.
Thanks, John. As we dove deeper into the data, we looked at the best testing songs by various demographics, gender, age, ethnicity, and geography, revealing some interesting findings. I want to share some insights on the best testing genres when we looked at the data of these several demographic angles. No matter what demo we look at, you will see pop as the common thread, a big part of the top 100, no matter how we slice the data, as John was telling you earlier. But let me show you where the results differ. Once again, here's the genre distribution of all the songs we tested. Women, now in tan on your screen, have a lot of pop, there's that common thread, and a significant amount of hip hop, 23%, and country, you see that at 18% in the second column. Men, in green, have a large amount of pop in their top 100, just like women, 30% hip hop, R&B, but only 8% country. Looking at the results by age, consumers 12 to 34 in tan on your screen have a lot of hip hop, R&B, and pop, and among the songs they rate best, and very little country, only 4% you see. Consumers 35-54, the older half of our participants, look really different. 38% of their top 100 is pop, 33% country, and very little hip hop, R&B, a mere 11%. So country is more prevalent in the best testing songs of women and consumers 35-54. Hip hop, R&B, more prominent among consumers 12 to 34 and men. Also, we see interesting differences by ethnicity. First, 70% of the best testing songs among Black consumers are hip hop, R&B. The remainder is mainly pop, 21% you see in tan. Pop, once again, the common thread across demos. The top 100 among Hispanics in green is pop, hip hop, R&B, and Latin. We see very little country in their top 100, but alternative rock is evident. And here are the best testing songs among other consumers. On your screen now in red, this refers to whites, Asians, and others, the same ethnic characterization that Nielsen uses. Their top 100 includes a large percentage of pop, 37%, country, 28%, far less hip hop, R&B, a mere 14%, and more alternative rock than among any other ethnicity at 13%. One more demographic view. We asked people whether they live in some place they would characterize as urban, suburban, or rural. And note the differences in the highest rated contemporary songs among these three groups. Urban consumers in tan see that pop and hip hop, R&B dominate their top 100. Suburban consumers coming in green look very similar to urban people. And that wasn't the case in our last study, where country was more prominent among suburban consumers. I'm going to show you those trends in just a couple of minutes. While rural consumers coming in red, a large amount of their top 100 is country, 43%, 29% pop, and only 15% of their top 100 is hip hop, R&B. Here's the trend among urban people. Looking across the three super studies, we see very little change in the top 100. But let me show you the trend among suburban people. A lot more hip hop, R&B this year, more than either of the first two studies, and far less country compared to our last super study. And among people who identify as living in a rural setting, country again makes up a very large percentage of their top 100. Slightly downward move from 48% last study to 43% this time around, and hip hop, R&B is up some. But the really big takeaway is that country is huge with rural consumers and not so with urban or suburban consumers this year. Hip hop goes the other way. Does especially well among urban and suburban consumers, not with rural ones, despite some upward movement. Let's take a look at these results from a different perspective, political orientation. Among consumers with a liberal political lean, pop and hip hop, R&B make up a sizable amount of their top 100 and almost no country. Among those with a conservative political lean, on the other hand, country and pop dominate, and we see only a small amount of hip hop, R&B titles among their best testing songs. Next, I'd like to tell you about the profile of the top 100 among daily streaming listeners, daily AM/FM radio listeners, daily smart speaker listeners, and daily podcast listeners. The best testing songs among daily streaming listeners include a good deal of hip hop, R&B, and far less country. Pop, once again, is the common ground and the largest percentage of daily streamers top 100. This is the profile you're likely to see when you look at streaming data. A lot of hip hop, R&B, and pop, but not as much country. The top 100 of daily AM/FM radio listeners in green includes a large percentage of pop and equal amounts of country and hip hop, R&B. Whereas the top 100 among daily smart speaker listeners in red looks very much like that of daily AM/FM radio listeners. Not much difference between these two groups. But the top 100 among daily podcast listeners in brown looks very much like that of daily streaming listeners. Not much difference between these two groups. So, smart speaker listeners look like AM/FM radio listeners. Podcast listeners look like streaming listeners from this perspective. And that's an interesting correlation to us. And finally, when we take a deeper look at consumers who prefer various streaming services, we find interesting differences among those who prefer Amazon Music, Apple Music, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube. Consumers who prefer Amazon Music in tan have a lot of pop in their top 100, 41%. You see lots of country, 28% there, and significantly less hip hop, R&B, only 11%. Apple Music fans look very different. Nearly half of the top 100 among those who prefer Apple Music for streaming is hip hop, R&B, and their best testing songs include very little country. In contrast, country represents a sizable portion of the top 100 of those who prefer Pandora, 35%. Those who prefer Spotify look quite different, with lots of pop, 44%, and alternative rock, 16%, the most we see among streaming service users. And among those who prefer YouTube, you see a very large percentage of hip hop, R&B, and pop, and again, very little country. So people who prefer Apple Music and YouTube have above average percentages of hip hop and R&B in their top 100, but very little country. Conversely, people who prefer Pandora and Amazon Music have a lot of country in their top 100. Not coincidentally, we find that the audiences of Pandora and Amazon Music lean older than the audiences of these other streaming services. Finally, those who prefer Spotify have a lot of pop, followed by hip hop and R&B, but we also see notable overperformance of alternative rock with those who prefer Spotify. Back to you now, Warren.
Thanks, Sam. And thanks to everyone for joining us for today's presentation. Once again, I want to give shout outs to our friends at MRC Data and Hooks Unlimited for their assistance in making this study happen. As I mentioned at the beginning of our presentation today, this is the third in a now annual series of studies. We are thrilled with the response we received to the first two and how the Contemporary Music SuperStudy has emerged as the benchmark for the state of consumer appetites for contemporary music. This third study represented a unique opportunity to see how the pandemic impacted those appetites. And while we highlight some noteworthy points of evolution in them over the past year, John's references to Groundhog Day earlier make it clear that overall contemporary music, like many things in our society, took a pause in 2020. When we return a year from now with Contemporary Music SuperStudy 4, we hope that we can identify a lot of new music released this year that generates excitement among consumers. Once again, I remind you that we will be conducting a Q&A session in just a moment, so please get your questions in by typing them into the GoToWebinar software. Before we answer your questions, we do want you to know that our website, ColemanInsights.com, will be a great resource for more details from the Contemporary Music SuperStudy 3. If you're not already a subscriber, you can sign up for our free Tuesdays with Coleman blog. which over the past 3 weeks featured many of the findings we presented today. Also, if you're a Coleman Insights client, be aware that one of the benefits of our Coleman Complete service is that we will be providing you with exclusive access to the song-by-song data through our website later this spring. On behalf of John Boyne, Sam Milkman, Jay Naklis, and our entire team at Coleman Insights, I thank you for attending our presentation today. I'll now turn things back over to Jay so that we can answer your questions.
Okay, question number 1 comes from Mike Moore, who says, how did people classify themselves as fans of a particular format?
Well, I think that one's actually a pretty straightforward finding from the study. In addition to scoring songs, we also had our respondents rate descriptions of different genres of music. So when John showed you earlier how alternative fans, for example, felt about all the different genres, that was based on people who expressed a strong appetite for the alternative music genre as we described it to them.
Okay, next question comes from Andy, who says, what are the implications for current versus recurrent airplay based on these findings? Should there be more emphasis on recurrence to build the strongest music hours?
Wow, we could probably talk about that for about the remaining time we have, Sam and John. Either of you want to jump in with a thought on that one?
I would start by saying be careful with that. You certainly don't want to upset your overall strategy and what your brand is famous for, but it does suggest that there is a lot of good music potentially for you to play from the recurrent categories.
I'd also say this study, in a way, is looking backwards, not forwards. And we would hate for you to change your strategy based on this and this alone when, let's say, you get a wealth of good new music coming out, this summer.
Yeah, I think I would amplify that point. I think, one of the things that we see is, as John really showed you in great detail at the beginning of our presentation, is how much older this year's best testing music is. And a big part of that, of course, is the pandemic and the fact that a lot of music was held back and not released. So I think the last thing you want to do is move in a recurrent direction when theoretically over the next couple of months, as artists start touring again, we're going to have a plethora of new music to choose from. I don't think you want to be behind the curve on that.
All right, next up is Mike Castellucci, who says, out of the best streaming, best selling, and best radio songs, did you notice any patterns as to which category of songs may have researched or tested better or worse?
Sam, I think since you talked about, go ahead, John, I'm sorry.
Well, I would say that in a way, really, it's each of those media platforms has different goals. And so think about what they're trying to achieve and also think about what we were doing with this study. In radio, for example, it's about appealing to a mass big group of people, as much as kind of you can stretch it within the bounds of your format and your target. In radio, you're hurt by the things that are negative to a good chunk of your audience. And so you're really looking for, in a way, broad appeal. You want high passion, of course, but you got to be careful about the negatives. Whereas in streaming, it's really about catering to the fans. And because you can skip a song could be, generate a lot of positives, but it could also be very, very polarizing. And so that's why you'll see differences sometimes between what works in the streaming world and what works in, say, the airplay world. As for this particular study, it's really more kind of like an airplay type study in the sense that, remember, when Warren explained it earlier, we're measuring mass appeal. This is not about passion with young people or passion with new music heads. This is about a big, broad group of people and understanding kind of what's broadly known and appealing to them.
Questions from Mike. Here's another one. To what do you attribute the dramatic downturn in country suburban listening? Is it possible it was inflated last year and now returned to a more normal level?
I guess yeah, it is possible. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that spike we saw last year was interesting. You know, we work with a lot of country radio stations in particular around the country, and we thought that might have been a hopeful sign for a rebound for the genre, which had been definitely struggling at the time. The fact that it kind of dropped back down this year, and especially dropped down with suburban consumers, you know, obviously maybe suggest that our optimism didn't really have a sustainable basis. But that's why we do this every year, so that we can see, you know, if these genres grow or decline in appeal. And it'll be interesting in a hopefully more normal year next year, what country looks like.
And a couple more observations on country. I mean, when we dig into it, the appetite for country among the core country fan base holds strong and deep. So what's happened this makes perfect sense. When a genre is kind of really big, it tends to spread its wings into more casual fans. And so that's what we were seeing more of last year. And remember, last year you also had, like, you know, several Dan and Shay titles that were crossing over. I mean, it was just there was some meat on the bones there. And then the other thing I'll mention is that, and this is a little speculative, but, you know, country is a big touring, big concert format. And we wonder also what the impact of the pandemic had, and did it really impact country particularly hard because the artists weren't out and about as they normally would be in support of their music.
So what happened in the suburbs? We see these patterns. Studies like this don't answer the why question. That may be up to you, or may require further research, but why country is not as prominent among those who identify as suburban consumers, we just don't know at this moment.
How many total songs were tested?
John, the exact number? Do you remember? Your mic is off, John.
It was several hundred. It would take me a little digging to go find the actual number.
It was roughly 300 songs.
Yeah. All right, very good. That is it for the questions that we have this afternoon.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us. If you do have additional questions, you can visit our website, colemaninsights.com, and there is a contact page. If you want to ask us any other additional questions about the study, just fill out the form on that page and one of us will get back to you.
Everyone for attending today's webinar. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.